Good evening, everyone. Okay, my ads counters are not lined up, which doesn't surprise me, but good evening, anyone. Anyway, it's 9 o'clock, and my Twitch stream just fucking... No, it is. But anyway, we finished a book of fairy tales 2 weeks ago. We read an extra short book last week. And now we're going to read the book that got voted on, which is Gypsy Tales by Eric and Nancy Protter. But as usual, I want to wait a little while to see if anyone's going to show up. But, it's Friday. It's perfectly fine to not be in a rush to do anything. Weekend starting, and it's a long weekend anyway, because we've got Memorial Day Monday. Yeah. I'm hoping my volume's going to be good. Okay, well, the gauge on OBS says it looks fine, so my microphone's peaking about half. Yeah, new book today. Not completely out of copyright. The book itself isn't. The stories themselves are far older. But if you check on the playlist, I'll put it up on the YouTube channel, you will find a link for the book. I could not find any current copies of it, so I'm not sure if it's even printed anymore. I could not find any through bookshop.org. I could only find one through Thrift Books. So I will keep trying to see if I can find more copies of the book if people want to read it. I don't believe it's on Gutenberg, but I haven't had a chance to check. Because it's not quite old enough for Gutenberg yet. The copy I have... What was it? It was printed in 1967. At the Stratford Press. But apparently they have a series of collections they have. I was able to find some of the other ones on Bookshop. I found the Folk and Fairy Tales of Far Off Lands. And Gypsy Tales book I'm reading. I did see a Children's Treasury of Folk and Fairy Tales, which I think I may have a copy of. But this book does have credits and acknowledgments. Among the most significant works consulted for translation, adaptation, and research was Ziegler and the Martian by Arthur Eichel, Marnbach, The Romany Rye, and Gypsy Tents, Gypsy Folk Tales from Edinburgh in 1899, and Transylvania Ziegler Martin, also 1866, The English Gypsies and Their Language in 1873. So as I said, the stories in this book are older than the book itself. And unlike the Andrew Lang books, there's not a preface. There's only a single dedication, and it is our parents. So this will be just a straight collection of stories, without really anything extra. So, and I last minute got the book picture up on this thing because I had a copy of the picture on my computer already, and it's actually a picture of my book that I was able to, take a picture on my phone, put it on my Discord, then downloaded the picture and put it on this. So, this is the book. Again, wait, where is that little stuff up top? There we go. Oh, looks right on. Oh, yes. But this is a book we'll be reading for the next possibly 2 to 3 weeks. It's not a lot of stories, and they're done in large prints because they were meant for children to actually read. In the first story in the book, and thus the first story for the night, The Watchmaker's Apprentice. In Romania, many years ago, there lived a very poor young boy. Although he was clever, he had never had the opportunity to go to school. One day he decided to go to Bucharest, the capital of his country, to learn a trade. He had never been in a large city before, so he wandered through the streets, looking at different shops until he arrived at that of a watchmaker. In great fascination, he leaned his elbows against the window frame and watched the apprentices at their work. After some time had passed, the owner of the shop, who had observed the lad, came out and spoke to him. "Why do you stand there like that, boy?" he asked. "Because I would like to become a watchmaker," replied the lad. "I enjoy watching your apprentices." "Well," replied the master, "I like your attitude. I will hire you for 3 years. For the first year, however, you will have to chop wood, tend the fires, and do a variety of chores. Whatever extra time you have, you will spend watching the other apprentices." The young boy gladly agreed to these terms. Each day he conscientiously performed a great many chores, and whenever he had spare time, he watched the master watchmaker and his apprentices. So it happened that the watchmaker had one of the emperor's clocks in his shop. It was the most unusual timepiece, but not just because it played 24 different tunes, but because it possessed a magical quality of making the emperor younger whenever he listened to all 24 of the songs. 15 years ago, the clock had broken down, and nobody had been able to repair it. Now the emperor was aging, and was so afraid that the clock would not be repaired that he ordered half of his kingdom to anyone who could make the precious instrument play its tunes and keep accurate time. The watchmaker and his apprentices had put months, even years of effort into the clock, but to no avail. They were unable to make the instrument play its songs and keep time correctly, simultaneously. But the most famous clockmakers of Vienna, Prague, and Paris had been to the shop and had examined the clock, but their efforts also had ended in failure. On Easter Sunday, the watchmaker and his apprentices joined the townspeople at the church services. Only the watchmaker's mother and the boy remained at home. He had stayed there because there were many small tasks that he had to be done while everybody was in church. He started the fire, chopped some wood, and cleaned the floor, and then he took the emperor's clock and set it down on the table. When he removed the pendulum, he noticed that it was slightly crooked. He worked very carefully and succeeded in straightening it. Next, he replaced the minute hand with a new one because he thought the old one was a little too heavy. Finally, he opened the music box and removed 2 of the pipes. These he cleaned thoroughly and replaced. He wound the clock and triggered the song mechanism. To his surprise, the clock began to strike, tick, and play its 24 tunes. At church, the people heard the familiar sounds and excitedly ran to the watchmaker's shop, led by the master watchmaker himself. When the lad saw the people, he became frightened, thinking his master would certainly be angry with him for having worked on the clock without his permission. Instead, the watchmaker asked his mother, "Where is the great master who has managed to repair the emperor's clock?" "It was no great master," replied the old woman, "but only the lad whom you hired a few months ago." When the clockman, when the watchmaker heard this, he was overjoyed. He immediately visualized the great fortune he would be able to collect from the king. He praised the lad and promised that he would never again have to do any chores. Instead, he would make him the foreman of his shop and place him in charge of all the other apprentices. "Hey, Matsu. Welcome in. Congrats on getting first." The watchmaker then dressed himself in his finest clothes, placed the clock in a beautiful wooden box, and went to see the king. As soon as the king had listened to the 24 tunes, he became younger. He descended from the throne and asked, "Watchmaker, who repaired the clock?" "I did, your majesty." "That is not true," replied the king. "That clock has been in your shop for 15 years, and you have not been able to repair it. I order you to bring before me the genius who succeeded where all others have failed." The watchmaker left and soon returned with the boy. The king ordered that the watchmaker be given 3 baskets full of gold ducats. The lad, however, was ordered to remain at the court. He was given the special assignment of taking care of the clock. For this work he was paid a handsome salary of 10,000 gold ducats a year. After having worked at the king's court for 13 years, the lad was well on his way to becoming one of the richest men in the country. During his 14 years there, the emperor decided that his beautiful daughter should marry. Since no suitable husband could be found, the princess decided on an unusual plan. "My good father," she said one day, "I am going to pretend to be dumb. Whoever is clever enough to make me talk shall become my husband." The king thought this was an excellent idea, but to throw the thousands of unsuitable subjects who doubtlessly would show up at court to make an attempt to the princess talk, the king proclaimed that whoever failed in making his daughter talk would have to pay a huge fine, and also be banished from the kingdom forever. During the first 6 months, more than 500 suitors tried to make the princess talk, but not a single one succeeded. The lad, who had fallen in love with the princess, decided that he would also have to try to make her talk. Although the king liked him, he warned him that if he failed, he too would be banished, for no exceptions could be made. This did not dissuade the boy. That very day he went to see the princess. He told her jokes and tried to make her laugh. He asked her questions. He tried to trick her. Finally, he even threatened her. But the princess did not say one word. Discouraged, he left the room. "Well, lad," said the king, "how did you do?" "I failed, your majesty," he replied. "Then you will have to leave my kingdom," the monarch sadly replied. "I think that your majesty might make an exception in my case. I should like to have a second chance." "That you shall have," said the king. The next day the lad went to the princess again, and again failed at his task. "I am sorry, my friend," said the king when he heard the bad news. "This time you will have to leave." "Isn't it common practice for a man to be forgiven 3 times?" asked the lad. "All right," said the king. "You have been invaluable and loyal, hence I will grant you this favor." The next day the boy went to visit the princess again. "Today, dear princess," he said, "I'm going to tell you a story." The princess did not even look at him, not in the least bit discouraged by her behavior. He began. "There once lived a king who had 3 sons, and it so happened that all 3 sons fell deeply in love with the same princess, a shy, sweet, lovely girl whose parents ruled the neighboring kingdom. But since it wouldn't be possible for the 3 young men to marry one maiden, The sons agreed among themselves that their father should decide which one should be the princess. Well, 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 resumed the king. This is indeed a difficult problem. I love you all equally, my sons, and I certainly don't want to hurt any of you, or even seem to favor one of you. Hence, we will have to invent a contest of some sort. And suddenly the king thought and thought and thought. At long last a smile appeared on his face. I direct the three of you to go out into the world and secure the strangest object you can find. The one who returns the most unusual article will be the one to marry the princess. The brothers welcomed this proposal immediately and set forth to search for the strangest item in the world. They walked across fields, arm in arm, and when they came to a crossroad, each one set in a different direction. The oldest brother arrived at a large city, and although he looked everywhere, he couldn't find anything that was truly unusual. There were beautiful mirrors, magnificent tools, rare clocks, music boxes, lovely costumes, but he didn't see a thing that could not be found elsewhere. He was about to continue his search in some other town when he noticed a merchant who was selling old and very shabby coats. The merchant beckoned. The prince walked over to him. What do you think of this coat? Asked the merchant, pointing to one that was particularly ugly and moth-eaten. It is worthless, perhaps the ugliest coat I have ever seen, replied the prince. Well, the merchant snickered, you couldn't be more incorrect. This is a magic coat. If you put it on and tell it where you wish to go, it will whisk you there before 1 second has elapsed. You are nothing but a storyteller. I tell only the truth. Try it out. Where would you like to be? In Bucharest? In London? Or perhaps in Paris? Listen, replied the prince. If we could just fly to the mirror shop I first visited when I came to town, that would be proof enough. The prince put on the coat and wished to be at the door of the shop. He was there immediately. Happily, the prince paid the merchant the 10,000 ducats he demanded, for he was sure that neither of his brothers could possibly find so unusual an object. In the meantime, the second brother had come to a small village. There he saw a man selling mirrors. Tell me, merchant, the prince asked, do you know any place where I might find something that is truly different, something that I could not possibly find anywhere else? I think I have just the thing for you, said the merchant in a croaking voice. What is it that you would like to see most right now? My youngest brother, answered the prince. Then look in this mirror, said the merchant, while pointing to a small ordinary piece of glass and a broad crack running through it. And tell me what you see. The prince did as he was told, and to his astonishment he saw his youngest brother walking along a country road. This is a most remarkable mirror, he said. I must own it. And the prince paid the merchant the 10,000 ducats demanded for the mirror. He carefully placed it in his side pocket and started for home, convinced that neither of his brothers could have found a more unusual object. The third brother never did reach a town, or even a village. As he slowly ambled down a country road, he met an old man selling peaches. The prince was hungry and thirsty, and the peaches were unappetizing because they were dry, shriveled, and wormy. My good man, said the prince, I'm terribly hungry, but there isn't a single fresh, juicy peach in the entire basket. The old man shoveled through the peaches and finally picked one from the bottom of the pile. How much do you want for that peach? Asked the prince. 10,000 ducats, wheezed the old man. Oh, this is no time for jokes, he replied angrily. I agree, said the merchant, but isn't it obvious to you that this is no ordinary peach? What do you mean? Asked the prince. It looks very plain to me. If a sick person takes a bite from it, he will instantly get well again. And furthermore, this peach will last for many years. You must really take me for a fool, said the prince, and I doubt that even a fool would believe such an outrageous story. The old man pointed to the side of the road where a crippled man sat moaning. He handed this peach to the man and asked him to take a small bite. The sick man leaped to his feet immediately, completely healed. In truth, said the prince, this is a wonderful fruit. I shall gladly give you the 10,000 ducats. He placed the peach in his pocket and walked back to the crossroads where his three brothers had agreed to meet after obtaining their special gifts. When they were together again, they examined each other's objects. Naturally, one was convinced that his own was the most spectacular. At this point, the watchmaker stopped telling his tale and looked at the princess. He noticed that she had become extremely interested in the story. Turning to her, he asked, "Which object, dear princess, do you think is most unusual?" The girl opened her mouth as if to talk, but then remembered her vow of silence. "Well, let me continue with my story, since you have no opinion," said the lad, and he noticed that she was very irritated by his remark. The youngest of the king's three sons then said, "Let me borrow your mirror, brother, so that I can see what our princess is doing." No sooner had he done this than his face turned white and his body shook with fear. "Brothers," he exclaimed, "I'm afraid we are too late. Our princess is terribly ill." The brother who had purchased the magic coat asked the others to come under it, and in less than a second the three were at the princess's bedside. The youngest brother then placed a tiny piece of a peach in her mouth, then arose immediately, her illness completely cured. The princess went to see the king and explained what had happened. "I should believe I should marry the youngest princess. I believe should be the one to marry the princess," said the youngest, "because my peach saved your life." But the oldest son said, "Well, that is quite true, but your peach would have been valueless if my coat hadn't brought us here by our bedside in time. Therefore, I really think that my object is the most important and unusual one, and that I should be entitled to a hand in marriage." "Oh, what good would your coat and your peach have done?" asked the middle brother. "If we had not discovered through the use of my mirror the princess was deathly ill. Clearly, my object was the most unusual, and I should be allowed to marry the princess." The king listened, and then he said, "Indeed, this is a difficult problem, but I believe the mirror is the most unusual object. Hence, my middle son deserves to marry the princess." The watchmaker stopped his story and looked intently at the princess. "And what do you think?" he asked her. "This is grossly unfair," she blurted out, no longer able to remain silent. "Clearly all three objects are equally unusual, therefore the princess should be consulted." "You are quite right," said the watchman, with a great smile on his face. At last he had succeeded in making the princess break her silence. And that is exactly what did happen. The young princess was brought before the king. She said she thought the greatest merit belonged to the youngest son, who had cured her with the peach. And when the king asked her to explain why that should be, she replied that it was the simple reason that she had always loved him. "And that is the way it should be," said the princess. "In truth, I don't know why I've been so stubborn as to not admit that I loved you for some time." And when the lad heard this, he was very happy, not only because he had made the princess talk and thus save himself from banishment, but mainly because the princess truly loved him. When the king heard the news, he too was pleased, for he had always liked the clever lad, and always had thought of him as the one who could rule justly over his people. Okay. The Watchmaker is the part story is also in the story of the Silent Princess. So yeah, folktales migrate. Good story though. Sorry about the sound of me flipping pages. I was kind of hoping I didn't miss any pages because it was pages thick. So, our second story for the night: The Apprentice and the Cursed Castle. Years upon years ago, there lived a poor lad in the province of Locovania. For 7 hard years he had been a blacksmith's apprentice, and during that time he had not even learned how to shoe a horse. Hence, when his apprenticeship was over, he decided to seek his fortune elsewhere. He walked towards the nearest city, but by the time he arrived there, night had fallen, and the huge entrance gates were closed. So he gathered some straw together and shaped it into a bed, and lay himself down on it, and fell asleep. When he awoke the next morning, he noticed a hole in the wall. He crept through it and entered a magnificent castle. To his surprise, he realized that there was not a living soul in the city. The emperor, empress, the prince and princesses, as well as all the people, had been turned to stone. When he entered the great dining hall of the palace, a cat came and placed some food on the table. After he had finished the excellent repast, the cat sat down next to him and gave him a deck of cards. Then he spoke. "My lord will arrive this evening, and he will want to play cards with you. Play with him until 10 o'clock, then slap him in the face. Between 10 and midnight, ghosts, evil spirits, and devils, as many as there are blades and glass on the lawn, will torment you. Under no circumstances are you to even say one word to them, no matter what they say or how much they threaten you. If you should falter and speak as much as a single word, then you too will be turned to stone, and you will remain a stone figure for 100 years. Do you think you can perform this task? Do you think you can stand up to the evil creatures?" "Yes," said the apprentice. "The past 7 years have taught me how to endure a great deal of pain without uttering a word of complaint." He stretched out on a cot and slept until 9 o'clock. Then he heard a loud rap on the door. A tall man in a dark cape entered the room and asked the apprentice if he would like to play cards. They played until 10 o'clock. Then the lad slapped the stranger's face. Instantly the hall resounded with fearsome howls and screeches. Ghosts and devils rushed over to the lad and asked him what he was doing in the palace. When he did not reply, they threatened to throw him into a lion's den. But when he still did not answer, they tried new tactics. They promised him sacks filled with gold and silver if he would only talk, but the lad didn't say a word. Then they pushed him and shoved him. They kicked him and slapped him in the face, but the lad didn't say a word. They pulled his hair and twisted his ears, and when it seemed that a moan of pain would cross his lips, the clock struck 12. Instantly, the spirits disappeared. The lad dragged himself back to the cot and fell asleep. When he awoke the next morning, he noticed that the parts of the statues were no longer stone. The arms apparently to have life in them. He walked down the long hall. They moved, as if to salute him. The cat once again served him food and said, "Tonight, everything will be much worse. But if you can maintain your strength and stand up to the monsters, you will be richly rewarded." At exactly 9 o'clock, the strange lord, this time dressed in a velvet cape, appeared before him. "Let us play cards," he said in a deep and sinister voice. At 10 o'clock, the lad once again slapped him in the face. Instantly the spirits returned. This time they had bodies of men, with heads of tigers, snakes, and bats. If you speak, lad, they said, we will tell you the secrets of life. But when he did not speak, they punched him and tripped him. They pinched him and bit him, but nothing they did could make the apprentice talk, and with the first chime of the clock striking midnight, they disappeared as mysteriously as they had arrived. The next morning, when he awoke, he heard voices in the palace. He realized that the statues were no longer stone, but that they were still unable to move. The cat brought him food and royal clothes. He ate, then put on the handsome clothes, and went into the princess's chamber. She smiled at him and said, "One more night, my lord, and I shall become your empress." Then her eyes closed, and she fell asleep. Upon returning to his chamber, the cat warned him of the coming night. "Tonight will be the worst. It will be the most unbearable. But if you have the strength, you will be richly rewarded." The cat, indeed, told the truth. This night was the worst. The spirits changed their shapes to those of his father and mother. Since the lad had not seen his parents for 7 years, he was most anxious to speak to them. Once he almost opened his mouth, but then he remembered how the cat had warned him of the treachery of the evil spirits. And when they saw that the lad did not fall for their tricks, they changed into tarantulas and scorpions and threatened to sting and bite him. Finally, they promised to kill him if he would not talk. One of the spirits turned into a giant, lifted a huge boulder over his head, prepared to hurl it upon the lad, threatening to crush him. Just then it seems that the boy thought all was lost. Just when the boulder was leaving the giant's hands, the clock struck 12. Absolute silence returned to the room. The next morning he awoke to the playing of music. The valet entered his room, bowed low, and said, "What would your majesty like for breakfast this morning?" But before the lad could answer, a handsome young prince, dressed in the finest clothes the poor apprentice had ever seen, said, "My friend and future brother-in-law, I salute you. You have freed this kingdom from the evil spell with which it had been cursed. 10 years ago, my sister refused to marry the sinister lord with whom you had played cards the past 3 nights. When she learned that he was an evil spirit, to take his revenge, he turned every living thing in the castle to stone. Once a year I was permitted to stalk through the castle in the form of a cat, and it happened that just on the day you appeared, you bravely withstood all the tests imposed on you. The reward for having freed us is to become our king." Upon hearing this, the young lad dressed himself in the magnificent wedding robes of a prince of the realm. When he entered the banquet hall, the lovely princess came up to him and embraced him. The wedding was held that very same day, but unlike other wedding celebrations that last for just a few hours, this one continued for 3 days and nights. In the meantime, the lad had made arrangements to have his parents brought to the castle. Great was everybody's surprise when they found out that the parents of their handsome young king were gypsy folk. But as much as the young prince tried to persuade his parents to stay with him in the castle and enjoy his good fortune, the gypsies refused. They understood that their own happiness was not based on riches and the comfort of regal living. They were people of the earth, nomads whose restless spirits made them move from town to town and from village to village. Their pleasure lay in the simple life around a campfire, in song and dance. Hence, the prince was not surprised one morning to find that his parents had left, but he was deeply moved to find the message they had left for him. All is as all must be, each man to his own destiny. Yeah. No mention of gypsies until the end of the second story in the book. But you can tell the region. Our third story for the night. The Gypsy Who Outsmarted the Devil. In Moravia, many, many years ago, once lived Gypsy, who had saved enough money to buy a plot of land. Unlike other gypsies, he did not care for the wanderer's life. He did not enjoy moving from campsite to campsite, from town to town. All he really wanted to do was to settle down in the country with his pretty young wife and farm some land. Finding the right farm, however, was not easy. Usually the land was too expensive, or the soil was too rocky and dry, or where there was insufficient grazing land. He had searched for nearly a year and used up a part of his savings when, quite unexpectedly, he came across a plot of land that appeared to have all of the qualities for which he was searching. When he asked who owned the land, he was surprised to learn that it belonged to the town. This puzzled him. He could not understand why the three farmers whose land adjoined this particular plot had never purchased it. At the same time, this information also pleased him because he knew that it would be easier and less expensive to obtain land from the municipality than from a farmer. A farmer might be anxious to make a profit. Thus, he went to town to speak with the mayor, and the gypsy was completely taken aback when he was told that he would be able to buy the land for a mere 2 ducats. "How can this be?" asked the gypsy. "My dear man," said the mayor severely, "in all fairness, I must tell you before you purchase this particular plot that the reason it is so expensive is very simple. Nothing will grow on it. Many a farmer has spent days, even weeks, tilling the soil and planting all sorts of crops, but nothing, not even grass, will grow on it." "That is most curious," said the gypsy, shaking his head, "because I know enough about land to know that the soil is really quite good. Perhaps all the others have missed some trick." "I doubt that," answered the mayor, "but if you still want to buy it, go ahead. But I must warn you that I will not refund any money to you." Soon the necessary papers were drawn up and signed by both parties, and the gypsy proudly returned to his land. So interested was he in building the house as soon as possible, he immediately took a shovel and began to dig. Before he was a foot into the earth, a man dressed in a brilliant red coat was suddenly standing before him. "You cannot dig there," the stranger said in an angry voice. "This land belongs to us." "You must be mistaken," replied the gypsy, and from his pocket he pulled out the deed that proved his ownership. "I am not in the least bit interested in whether you or not the mayor sold this plot to you," replied the stranger. "Let me introduce myself. I am the devil. I tell you with all the authority I command that this long belongs to me and my companions." "Even if you are the devil," replied the gypsy, quite unafraid, for he knew the devil could do no harm to him, "this land belongs to me. I've spent hard-earned money for it, and I intend to build my house here and farm the land." "Look here," said the devil, who now realized that the gypsy was not going to be intimidated. "Once a week I come out and play and to have fun. This isn't a good place for you or any mortal being to live. I can assure you the noises we make would be unbearable for you to listen to, and you and your wife and children would be most unhappy." "I will take my chances," said the gypsy indifferently. "That will never do," replied the devil. "I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll pay you the money you've spent for this place. That way you can look for a more suitable place to farm." "That isn't good enough," replied the gypsy. "I've looked everywhere, and I haven't been able to find a place for the money I'm able to spend. If you want to sell me this place, you will have to pay much more than me." "All right," agreed the devil. "How much do you want?" "A cap full of gold coins," said the gypsy. "That's too much," said the devil. "Well then," said the gypsy with a grin on his face, "you give me no choice but to continue my work." He picked up a shovel and started digging again. "Stop, stop," shouted the devil. "I'll get you the money, but I have to go down below and keep it." When the devil left, the gypsy thought the matter over. He knew that devils were rich. Why settle for so little, he asked himself. Indeed, why settle for such a paltry sum? Then he thought of a clever plan. He took his shovel and dug a deep but narrow hole in the ground. Next, he took his cap and made a slit in it. Then he placed the cap over the hole and waited the return of the devil. The strange creature arrived soon enough, carrying a medium-sized satchel in his hand. He poured the coins into the cap, and of course, they just slipped through the slit into the hole beneath. What a trickster you are, the gypsy shouted at the devil in an irritated voice. Do you really think you can perform magic and get away with it? Did you think that I would settle for coins that you can make disappear? What are you talking about? Said the devil, who was very confused. Well, just look at the cap, said the gypsy. There isn't a single coin in it. I don't know what happened, replied the devil, completely bewildered, because I assure you that I did exactly what you asked me to do. Well, I gave you a chance, replied the gypsy. Now I see you cannot be trusted. I'll have to go ahead and build my house. Don't do that, pleaded the devil. Just give me a few more minutes, and I'll come back with more coins. About 15 minutes later, he returned, carrying a large sack. From it he poured, but the cap was still empty. I don't understand it, said the devil, looking at the gypsy with great disgust and mistrust. You look like a normal man. Your head doesn't appear to be so large that your cap can hold a full sack of coins, plus half another sack. Well, that's where you're wrong, laughed the gypsy. I have more brains than you can imagine. My head is much larger than you think. The devil looked at the gypsy again. He could only shake his head in disbelief. But since he could find no answer, he kept pouring the coins into the cap. At last the cap was nearly full, and the devil's bag was nearly empty. That's that, you have the money you asked for. And he disappeared as mysteriously as he arrived. The gypsy waited for a few minutes, just to make sure that his unearthly visitor would not reappear. Then he uncovered the hole and loaded the coins into a wheelbarrow and rushed off as fast as he could. With all the money he now owned, he had no trouble finding a nice farm. Because he had never before had so much money, he did not realize how quickly one could spend it. Thus, late one summer day, less than 2 years after his encounter with the devil, he was shocked and surprised to discover that he only had a few ducats left. Believing that he would be rich for many more years, he had not planted any crops. And now it was too late to make the farm productive. He realized that he was in grave trouble, so that very soon he would not have enough money to even buy a loaf of bread. All that day, and the next as well, he sat on his rocking chair, trying to find out a way out of this bad situation. Then at last, he thought of a plan. He decided to take a chance and go back to where the devil lived and attempt to trick him once more. As soon as he reached the old plot, he took a pickaxe from his shoulders and began to dig. Within seconds, the same devil appeared before him. So it's you again, said the devil. That was a nasty trick you played on me last time. I found the hole you made in the ground over which you had your cap. Believe me, I've been waiting for you these last 2 years. And now that you're in my power, you will have to pay for your trickery. I don't know what you plan to do, the gypsy replied very calmly. But if you had a plan to fight me, let me warn you that I am very strong. If you even dare to touch me, I'll tear this place apart. I don't believe you, said the devil. All right, then, retorted the gypsy. Can you squeeze water out of a stone? He handed the devil a hard white stone. The devil squeezed and squeezed, but did not succeed in obtaining even a single drop of liquid. You're pretty weak, said the gypsy. Give me the stone, and I'll show you what I can do. Once the gypsy had the stone, he exchanged it for a handful of curds. He did this so expertly that the devil didn't notice a thing. Then the gypsy squeezed the curds and water oozed from his hand. When the devil saw this, he became terribly frightened, and his knees knocked together in terror. He feared that he had, indeed, met his master. The gypsy knew that he was now in a strong position and could make a bargain. "Let me tell you," he said, "I am so annoyed with your behavior that I'll tear up this piece of land just to show you that you can neither threaten nor talk to me in the way that you just did." "Don't do that, don't do that," said the devil, who was afraid that what his companions might do to him if their hideout was destroyed. "Can we agree to some arrangement?" he asked, hopefully in a weak, pleading voice. "No," growled the gypsy, now playing his role for all it was worth. "I think you deserve to be taught a lesson." And he picked up a big shovel. "Wait a minute, please," the devil. "Please, just wait. I'll give you another sack of gold if you will promise just to leave us alone." "What?" shouted the gypsy. "Another measly little sack? Another sack like the one you gave me the last time?" "No," replied the devil. "I'll bring you one that's as big as I am." The gypsy raised his head and slowly looked the devil over. "Well, you are a stout fellow," he said, scratching his head. "All right, then, just to show you what a good person I really am, I'll make this bargain with you. But I warn you, devil, don't fool with me again." "I'll be right back," said the devil. And true enough, the devil returned with 15 minutes. On his back was a sack so big and heavy that even this powerfully built creature could do no better than to stagger along and practically collapse under its weight. "There you are," said the devil, dumping the sack at the gypsy's feet. But the gypsy said nothing. He knew that he would never be able to lift the sack. At the same time, he also knew that he could not admit this to the devil without revealing his own weakness. "I have no intention of carrying this heavy sack," said the gypsy last. "I expect you to bring it to my house." Hearing this, the devil became enraged, and was in no mood to carry such a heavy load any great distance. "All right, then," said the gypsy when he saw the devil was hesitating. "Our deal is off. I'll just amuse myself breaking up your hiding place. That's what I came here to do in the first place." "No, no, don't do that," panted the devil, who was still out of breath. "I'll do as you ask." He picked up the sack, and the gypsy led him towards his farm. After a few hours of walking, they reached the gate of the gypsy's home. The devil dropped the sack at the gate and ran off as fast as he could, afraid that the gypsy might ask him to perform some other chores. Of course, the gypsy was all too relieved to see the devil depart in such haste. Although he had fooled him, he feared that the creature might suddenly realize that he had been tricked. After having placed the coins in several coffers, Gypsy talked to his wife. Two of them agreed this time that the money would be put to good use. The very next day, the gypsy went into town and hired several experienced farmhands. Within a few years, his crops were plentiful, and the sale of the crops and food afforded them a good living. Never again did the gypsy venture near the place where the devils lived, for he understood that he had been extremely lucky. He knew that there was no sense in tempting fate a third time. Oh, man, I want to start sorting through the sticks and beef listing. I'm beginning to recognize all of these tropes everywhere. Ads are starting soon, so this is as good a time as any to take a break. Notice, there's a cute and stripy beast. So, yeah, I was skimming over one listing I found of it, and I was just going, okay, I recognize this one, recognize this one, recognize this one. And apparently, the motif archive is public domain, but the only people that print it is apparently the Indiana University. But I may talk to one of my friends who just got hired there and see if she can find a way to help me out. Because they've got copies on Amazon where it's like $80 a book, and there's 7 total books. Admittedly, books 6 and 7 are indexes. And it's not even labeled book 6 and 7, it's labeled 6A and 6B. But $80 for a freshly printed book. I could technically print them off myself and, do my own binding if I wanted to. Or I could submit it to one of the printers I've gone to before and just print my own books, but it'd be interesting to actually get them from the university. Let's see. I know I've got that stuff. Strange, I can find them on Amazon, and they're like $80 a book. Any other places I've found, refers back to the original publication. So the Motif Index of Folk Literature, Classification of Narrative Elements by Steph Thompson on Thrift Books is still $83. That's only one book of the 7. And admittedly, I will be getting these for research. But reading them, it really is just classification of motifs. But, yeah. One of those long-term goals. As I said, they may be on Gutenberg, and if they're on Gutenberg, I can probably get them downloaded. Admittedly, I like the printing of them to pay towards, the university, because why not? There's a Gutenberg Project app? Well, I'll see you. But, yeah. Anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and take a break. So, feel free to hang around, watch the cat. I'll be back in a bit. We should be back. Why has my scene not changed? Or is this... Okay, yeah, it did. Alright, now we'll try to chat. So, I looked it up. As much as I like to get it printed by the University of Indiana, because, well, that's where it worked. Someone in 2016 apparently took it upon themselves to scan it and post it to Internet Archive in PDF form that's actually got functioning links in it. Let's see. Let's see how big the file was. It's 200. Well, it's 2,497 pages. The size of the file uploaded is 1.9 gig. The PDF to download it is 14.4 meg. So of course I'm going to download it. Let's see. I need to put a trap on my computer just for books. But anyway. I hope everyone had a good break. I guess I could get the series in book reader format, but the only digital readers I have are... But, let me post the link for that real quick. The Mysterious Moments one? Here. Yeah, that's Internet Archive here. I need to find decent music because most of the music I have is stuff I was getting for video game design packets. And I've got several hundred video game music types that were, composed from video games. As opposed to the one I've got at the opening screen. I thought was very appropriate because the track is titled The Opening of a Book. And it just seems like the right thing to have at the opening of a narration stream. Ooh, Darth Parham has a three-stream streak. That's cool. But yeah, it's in the process of downloading it. Said it's going to take a while. Oh, it's done. Oh, all 14.4 meg of it is downloaded. But again, it's from Bloomington, Indiana, and I know someone who just got hired at that branch of the university. Oddly enough, in childcare. But anyway. See, we've got 3 stories so far done tonight. But I had to look at a different source because my redeem things are a little off. Unless I have my OBS window tapped, it doesn't show me the actual activity feed. But yeah, 45 minutes ago. While I'm reading, it's kind of hard to see things. In other words, but anyway, this is our 4th story. I'm a reader, not a counter. Okay, yeah. We read 3 stories so far. So our 4th story for the night, Tropsyn. There once lived a poor man who had 4 sons, and the oldest was 22 and the youngest 17. All 4 left home to seek their fortunes. They had traveled only a day when they met a farmer who, in return for harvesting his crops, would let them have as much wheat as they could carry away in 2 wagons. These terms seemed reasonable enough, and after a month of hard work the 4 brothers collected their wages. But since they had no use for so much wheat, and were concerned with their aging father, they decided to make a gift of the wheat to him. They knew that the 2 wagon loads of cereal would not only see him through the winter, but would also afford him a little extra money when he sold some of it to his neighbors. Take a picture of this. There's always one thing about getting a book at an estate sale that you never think of until it happens. My book has leaves pressed in it. And I don't quite recognize the leaf. I'll put a picture of the leaves up on the Discord with me. It took 6 or 7 minutes, and the last 2 cards were 6-9. Sounds about right for right now. Hence, after making their gift, they set off once again. When they had traveled for a week, they met a gentleman who asked them to work at the estate, offering each a horse in return for 1 year's labor. When the year was nearly up, Tropsyn, the youngest of the 4 brothers, went into the stable to look at the horses. There he saw many magnificent Arabians, Morgans, Percherons, and one unusually small Shetland. As he passed the pony, a strange thing occurred. The animal looked at Tropsyn and spoke to him in a human voice.
Tropsyn, said, when you choose your horse, select me.
Why should I do that? Asked Tropsyn.
I cannot tell you,
replied the pony.
Please believe me.
When the day came for the brothers to make their selections, one chose a Morgan, another an Arabian, and another the Percheron. They all laughed when Tropsyn called him a fool when he chose the weak and worthless pony. As they rode away, the pony's gait was so slow that it could not keep up with the bigger horses. Thus, Tropsyn was left far behind. But as soon as they were alone, the pony said,
Tropsyn, let me go into the brook and drink some water.
The lad dismounted and sat down by the tree, awaiting the animal's return. Within minutes, the animal was back, but somehow the tiny pony had changed its form and was now a fierce, glorious brown stallion.
Mount me, Tropsyn,
Commanded the stallion.
I will,
He replied, as soon as I pick up the beautiful gold feather that's lying on the ground.
No touch of the feather,
Said the horse.
or it will lead to nothing good.
It is too beautiful to leave behind, replied Tropsyn, and he picked up the feather and put it in his shirt. Because he listens to a horse. Even when you're getting something straight from the horse's mouth. Yes, I do puns on my stream too. Then they were off, and to Tropsyn's astonishment, the horse's hooves did not even touch the ground. This wonderful animal could actually fly. Well, in less time than it takes to blink an eye, Tropsyn had overtaken his three brothers. Where did you find that stallion? They asked when they recognized their youngest brother. I met a man who wanted to trade his horse for my pony, replied Tropsyn. He must have been an even bigger fool than you are, Tropsyn, they laughed. The four brothers rode on together until they came to a magnificent castle. The king, who owned the palace, greeted the four lads and offered them employment. The oldest was made stable keeper. The next was placed in charge of all the cattle. The third brother was appointed the chief swineherd, and Tropsyn was made the chief coachman. The three older brothers were very jealous of Tropsyn, for they felt that he had been given the easiest and the best, most dignified job. At night, when all four brothers were resting in a common bedroom, Tropsyn pulled the gold feather from his pocket. To everyone's surprise, it glowed brilliantly in the darkness. As soon as Tropsyn fell asleep, the three brothers decided that not only would they tell the king of the unusual feather, but also would say that Tropsyn had boasted that he could capture the golden bird from whom the feather had been taken. After the king had heard the brothers' tale, he ordered that Tropsyn be brought before him. I understand that you can capture the golden bird, said the lord. That I most certainly cannot do, your majesty, replied the lad, for I do not even know where the bird lives. Do not lie to me, Tropsyn, the king said gravely. I order you to capture the bird, and, he warned, if you do not bring it back to me by tomorrow night, I shall have you thrown into the dungeon. Tropsyn left tears in his eyes and went to the stable where his magnificent stallion was eating oats.
What's the matter, Tropsyn?
The horse asked the lad. My dear friend, Tropsyn replied, I have been given an impossible assignment. The lord and master of this castle has commanded me to bring the golden bird to him. If I fail on the task, I am to spend the rest of my life in the deepest dungeon.
Didn't I pick you not to pick up that feather?
Said the horse.
But it is too late to worry about that now. Do exactly as I tell you, and with a little bit of luck we will capture the golden bird. Jump on my back.
Tropsyn did as he was told. Within a few minutes he found himself before a broken-down hut.
Inside the shack there lives an old witch who is the owner of the golden bird. Although she may appear to be friendly, do not trust her. She is actually very nasty and will try to harm you. There is only one way to get the bird. After she has greeted you, she will walk over to the cage that contains the bird. The minute her back is turned, make a somersault and transform yourself into a flea. Then climb under her shawl and bite her on the shoulder. The itching will so infuriate her that she will throw the shawl onto the floor and forget about you for a couple of minutes. At precisely that instant, you must change yourself back into a man, grab the cage, and make your escape. I will be waiting for you, and we will be on our way before the witch realizes what has happened.
Hey, Salty, thank you for the lurk and for the streak. Tropsyn followed these instructions, and everything worked out perfectly. While the witch was scratching herself furiously, Tropsyn escaped with the bird. Nearly 5 minutes elapsed before the old hag came to her senses and realized that she had been duped. When Tropsyn returned with the golden bird, his brothers' faces turned red with rage. They decided upon a plan that they felt surely would lead to Tropsyn's downfall. The beautiful water princess lived at the bottom of the Danube River. Each Sunday she rose to the surface of the river and floated down it on a silver boat. Many a king and nobleman had tried to capture her then. However, when anything approached the boat, a whirlwind would suddenly form and suck the boat into the depths below, or smash it against the cliffs that lined the shores of the river. Early the next morning the three brothers appeared before the king. "My lord," said the oldest, "Tropsyn claims that he can capture the water princess."
"Have him brought here immediately,"
replied the king. When Tropsyn heard what he was supposed to do this time, he became very sad. "My lord," he said, "I don't know who told you the story, but it is not true. As you know, no one can capture the Danube maiden."
"I don't believe you," replied the king. "Did you not tell me the same thing about the golden bird? I expect you to capture the princess this Sunday. If you fail, I shall have you thrown into the deepest dungeon."
Alright. Not I've seen page. Look like those.
"What's the matter, Tropsyn?"
asked the stallion when Tropsyn entered the stable with his head bowed low. After the horse heard of the new task, he reassured his friend.
"Though this would be an impossible task for most creatures, we shall manage it. Now, listen closely. First of all, you must obtain a boat that is neither too large nor too small. On this boat you must place a number of jugs containing milk and honey and wine. But into the wine drop a few grains of sleeping potion. Then, by pushing boat behind, float it directly into the princess's path. When the princess sees that the boat is unoccupied, she will go aboard and drink of the wine, the milk, and the honey. As soon as the drug takes effect, the princess will fall asleep. At precisely that moment, but not a second earlier, you must jump onto the boat and row it as fast as you can to the west side of the Danube. I shall be waiting for you there, and before the princess awakens, we shall be back at the castle."
Tropsyn did as he was told, and everything worked according to plan. The king was delighted to meet the lovely maiden, but when he asked her to marry him, she made a strange request. "The man I will marry will have to bring my wild herd of horses to this castle." The king tried and tried, but didn't succeed in getting near the horses. They stampeded whenever he came within half a mile of them. "Why don't you try, Tropsyn?" said the king. "If you succeed, you shall not only marry the princess, but you also become the heir to my kingdom." Once again the lad sought the stallion's advice.
"Oh, once we have an easy task," replied the horse. "I shall bring the leader of the wild herd to the shore of the Danube, so that you can ride her back to the castle."
"But how about the rest of the herd?" asked Tropsyn.
"Do not worry," replied the horse. "They will follow the great mare."
Thus, Tropsyn and the stallion set off on their trip. When they reached the river's bank, Tropsyn dismounted, and the stallion waded into the water. Within minutes, the great mayor appeared and followed the stallion to the land. There, Tropsyn mounted the horse and in a gallop set off for the castle, followed by the entire herd. When the princess saw her horses arrive, she greeted Tropsyn and acclaimed him a great hero. Soon thereafter, a great wedding feast was celebrated, which lasted for 3 days and 3 nights. Although his 3 brothers had only wished ill for Tropsyn, he forgave them as soon as he appointed them to positions of great influence. On the evening of the wedding feast, Tropsyn wandered into the stable to speak to the falcon. "I owe everything to you," he said. "Just tell me what it is you wish, and it shall be granted."
"Everything has worked out well," replied the horse. "Now I wish to be set free. There's nothing more that I can do here."
"If that is your desire," replied Tropsyn, "you may go wherever you please, but I shall miss you deeply."
"To be free is my only wish," replied the stallion.
Tropsyn then unleashed the marvelous horse and walked with him to the castle gate. "Farewell, my friend," he shouted as the horse cantered off into the countryside. But just before the horse disappeared from view, Tropsyn saw Gypsy dressed in splendid costume from the Bakwana tribe mount him right away. Tropsyn never saw the horse again. Many years later, however, when gypsies had gathered by a campfire not far from the castle, he walked over to chat with him. When he asked about the horse, the old gypsy woman approached him. "Perhaps I can tell you something, Lord Tropsyn. Perhaps I can," she said. "Last night a great honor was paid to our tribe. The king of all the gypsies visited us. When I approached him and helped him dismount from his magnificent stallion, he said, 'If you should see Lord Tropsyn, tell him that a horse wishes him well.' That is all he said, Master Tropsyn, and I did not understand what he meant, but perhaps you do." The light of the campfire flickered on Tropsyn, and all who were near could see the smile on his face. "That is good news, indeed, my dear woman," he said. Then he stood gazing into the fire, thinking of his beloved horse and all of magnificent adventures the years gone by. Okay. Gypsy King was cursed to turn into a horse. For these being gypsy tales, only one has really had much to do with the gypsy. Anyway. And the next story for tonight, The Magic Pear. There once lived a king who had 4 sons. He was a wise king who was greatly loved by his people. One afternoon, while he was walking in the royal garden, he began to sneeze. Though at first he thought he had caught a cold, it was soon apparent that this was not the case. Nothing he tried could stop the sneezing. The best doctors of the land were summoned to the castle, but no treatment helped him. After his miserable affliction had continued for several weeks, the king became so weak that he was no longer able to get up from his bed. On the very day that the doctors had given up all hope, an old gypsy appeared at the palace. "What can you do?" asked the guard, "when the best doctors in the world haven't been able to help?" But the gypsy was so adamant about seeing the king that the Lord Chamberlain gave him permission to visit the monarch. "Your Majesty," said the gypsy, "I have come to tell you that there is one cure for your terrible affliction."
"You'd better tell me quickly,"
gasped the king, whose strength was ebbing with every passing minute. "Somewhere in this world there's a magic pear. If you could take just one bite from it, you would be cured."
"And where can this pear be found?"
the king asked incredulously. "That I cannot tell you," answered the gypsy. However, I can assure you that if you send your 4 sons in search of it, one of them will find it. Having said this, the gypsy left the room. Although the king did not really believe his visitor, he realized that there was no harm in attempting to find this wonderful fruit. Hence, he called for his 4 sons.
My sons, he said between sneezes, I'm told somewhere in this world there's a magic pear that can cure me. I ask that you find it for me. Whoever brings it back shall become heir to my kingdom.
The 3 oldest sons were not pleased to hear this. They were lazy fellows who did not like the idea of having to make a long and tiring trip. However, the youngest son was delighted to hear that there might be yet a cure for their father. That very same day, all 4 set out in search for the miraculous pear. The first brother rode towards the north, the second to the south, the third to the west, and the youngest towards the east. The oldest had traveled for nearly a week when he came to a land he had never seen before. It was a desolate country. No were houses or people to be seen. Just as he was wondering if he should turn back, he saw a gypsy approaching from a distance. "Good sir," said the gypsy, "I haven't eaten for days. Could you possibly give me a few pennies?" "I'll give you just 1 penny," replied the prince, "if you will tell me where I can find the magic pear." "Just keep going straight ahead," replied the gypsy, "and soon you'll come to a magic garden. There you will see a pear. Pluck it from the branch and then leave the garden as quickly as you can." "You better be telling the truth," shouted the prince, and he threw a penny at the gypsy's feet. After he had ridden for about a mile, he came to a great gate. He opened it and entered. Gold and silver flowers bloomed along a path that led straight towards a gigantic pear tree. He hurried to the tree. From one of its low branches hung a single pear. He plucked it from the branch and placed the fruit in his pocket. But instead of rushing from the garden, as the gypsy had told him to do, he decided to fill his pockets with the flowers. No sooner had he touched the first gold flower than a heavy sleep overwhelmed him, and when he woke, he saw that the gypsy was standing next to him. "You are not worthy of a king's son, therefore I will transform you into a raven. You shall keep this form until your father gets well." The gypsy then uttered some magic words, and the prince was immediately changed into a large, coal-black raven. A few days later, the second son, who had taken the southern route, met the same gypsy. When he was asked for some money, the proud and vain prince treated the gypsy no better than his brother had. But the gypsy told this son, too, about the magic garden, the special fruit. The prince did not succeed in leaving the garden with the healing fruit, as he also attempted to steal some of the gold and silver flowers. The gypsy then placed a similar curse on him, and the second he was transformed into a coal-black raven. The third brother, who had traveled west, fared no better. Within an hour of having met the gypsy, he made the same mistake and was also changed into a raven. When the youngest son met the gypsy a few days later, he immediately dismounted from his horse. "I can see that you are hungry," he said. "Here, have some of my bread." And he gave the gypsy all the money he had in his pockets and continued on his way. He had not ridden 20 yards when he heard the gypsy calling, "Come back, young prince. I know that you are seeking, and there's very little time left. If your father does not take a bite from the pear today, all will be lost." And then he told the prince what he had done to obtain the fruit. On entering the garden, the prince rushed to the tree, plucked the pear from the branch, then turned round and, looking neither to his left nor to his right, made his way back to the gate. As soon as he was outside the garden, he saw that the gypsy was waiting for him. "Here, take this branch," said the gypsy. "After your father has eaten the pear, take a walk to the courtyard of the palace. 3 ravens will settle at your feet. Before they can fly away, touch them with this branch." Having said this, the gypsy placed a hand on the prince's forehead, and instantly the lad found himself outside his father's palace. He ran into the chamber and gave the king the pear. By this time, the king had become so weak that he could barely open his mouth. As soon as the magic fruit touched his lips, he regained some strength, then took a huge bite. Lo and behold, the sneezing ceased immediately. Color came back to the king's tired face, and strength returned to his body. But before he could say anything to his son, the prince had already left the chamber and was on his way to the courtyard. No sooner had he arrived than 3 large coal-black ravens settled at his feet. The prince touched them with a special branch, and the birds were transformed back into his brothers. That day, there was a great celebration at the castle. The king announced that his youngest son would be the heir to the kingdom, and even though the 3 older brothers were somewhat jealous, they were grateful that he had freed them from a terrible curse. When it came time for the prince to take charge of the kingdom, he appointed his brothers to positions of great importance, and they, having learned their lesson, became fine and just administrators. But even today, in a remote section of northeastern Hungary, many peasants wonder whether they see large ravens flying over the wheat fields. These birds are really birds, or might they be something or someone else? Anyway, next story for the night. Jack and the Flock of Sheep. Once upon a time, there lived 3 young brothers. They owned a few acres of land, but no matter how hard they worked, they never succeeded in harvesting a good crop. Because the youngest brother was frail and sickly and therefore unable to work long hours, his older brothers blamed him for their misfortunes. Whenever they were angry, they would turn to him and say, "Jack, you're a no good fool." Thus it came about that one evening late in the fall, especially after an especially bad harvest, the 2 older brothers sat around the fire and discussed their troubles. Before too long, they decided that the land could not support the 3 of them, and because they were neither wise nor kind, they decided that they would get rid of Jack the Fool. The next morning, one of the brothers turned to Jack and said, "We're going for a walk." "Oh, where are we going?" said Jack. "To heaven," replied the middle brother, with a wry smile on his face. "Oh, let me come too," said Jack. "We don't want to show you the way," replied the older brother. "So if you want to come along, we will have to put you in a sack." "Well, that's fine with me," said Jack, not realizing that his brothers planned to take him to a distant lake and drop him into it. At once, Jack crawled into the sack. The brothers tied it up tightly and ran a pole through the knot. And then they started off, each lifting an end of the pole on their shoulder. After having walked for several hours, the 2 brothers became tired and their throats were very dry. Soon they reached a roadside inn. "Let's stop for a while," said one. "I'm too tired to continue on the right way." "All right," said the other brother. "It will give me a chance to quench my thirst." They dumped the sack in front of the inn door. "We'll be back soon, Jack. Then we'll show you heaven," laughed the older brother. After some time had passed, Jack became impatient, and, as was habit, he started to talk to himself. Just at that moment, a shepherd who was leading his flock to the pasture passed by and heard Jack talking. "What's the matter with you?" asked the shepherd. "Oh," replied Jack, "I'm on my way to heaven." "Is that so?" said the shepherd. "Do you think I might be able to get over there too?" "Well, certainly," said Jack, by this time somewhat suspicious of his brothers. "Just open the sack and you can take my place." Tired of his cramped quarters, Jack was eagerly looking forward to getting out of the bag. "Oh, very nice of you," replied the shepherd, "and since I have no use for my sheep in heaven, you may just as well take them." Just as soon as the knot was untied, out of the sack came Jack, and in crawled the shepherd. Jack then took charge of the sheep and leisurely drove them home. It wasn't long after this exchange that the two brothers came out of the inn. Each grabbed one end of the pole, and together they raised the sack. "It seems to me," said the oldest brother, "that Jack has put on some weight." "Never mind that," replied the other. "We're not far from our destination." About an hour later, they reached the lake. There they unslung the sack, and with a mighty heave, pitched it into the water, with the hapless shepherd inside. "Good riddance," said one to the other with a grin, and they turned around and made their way back home. As they neared the house, they cried out in amazement, for there stood Jack, surrounded by a beautiful flock of sheep. "Is it really you, Jack?" the older brother asked, in complete disbelief. "It certainly is," replied Jack, "and many thanks for the great favor you've done for me." "How's that?" the two brothers asked in unison. "Well, you were quite right to think that passage to heaven is through the lake, for it was there I found all these fine sheep." The two brothers stared at each other in utter disbelief. "And there's so many more there," continued Jack. "I only took the first ones." "Oh, there's no time to lose," said the two. "Won't you show us the way?" "I'll gladly do that, brothers," replied Jack. Quickly, the three turned to the lake. "Where exactly is the place that you found the sheep?" asked the oldest brother. "Right there," said Jack, pointing to a dark spot in the water. His first brother leaned forward to get a better look. Jack gave him a swift push, and he fell in. When they did not reappear immediately, the second brother asked, "Well, what is he doing now, Jack?" "Undoubtedly he is picking out the finest sheep." "Oh, Jack, push me in too. I also would like to have a chance to pick some from the fine sheep." "Obliged with pleasure." Then Jack, with a great grin on his face, turned around and went home. Jack obliged with pleasure. Then, with a great grin on his face, he turned around and went home. As they splashed about in the water, the two brothers soon understood that they had been duped. They realized also that it was not Jack who was the fool. When they returned home, they asked him for forgiveness. Knowing that his brothers had learned their lesson, Jack grasped their outstretched hands. Together, all three went back to their work, tilling the soil and working the land. For some reason, their land began to bear fruit. Within a few years, the three brothers were among the most prosperous and generous farmers in the land. And never did they turn away any man who sought their help. He didn't kill his brothers. I should be able to get one more story. So our next tale for the night: The Snake Who Married a Princess. Once there lived an old man and an old woman. They had no children, therefore worried about what would become of them once they were too old to work. One afternoon, when the sky was gray and the wind cold was whistling through the trees, the old woman said, "Tomorrow you must leave here and go and find the sun." The next morning the old man rose early. He picked up his axe, which was lying near the hearth, and departed. After having walked down a country lane for a few hours, he reached a wild forest he had never seen before. There he searched far and wide, somehow believing that he would miraculously stumble upon a young lad whom he would be able to bring back to his wife. But such luck was not to be. Not only did he fail in his task, but also in the more immediate one finding some food for himself. After having roamed through the forest for 3 days, he was so overcome with hunger and fatigue that there was nothing else for him to do but to return home. Just before he reached the edge of the forest, he noticed a little snake basking in the sun. He picked it up and placed it in his pocket and continued on his way. His wife was very upset when she learned that instead of finding a strapping young lad, her husband had come back with nothing better than a little snake. "What a fool of a husband I have," thought the old woman. A thought that was to recur many more times during the next few days, but she noticed that he was pampering the son, feeding cream daily, and the choicest morsels of meat. But what the old woman did not notice, mainly because she was afraid of snakes, was that the reptile was growing at an amazing rate. One afternoon, about a month after the old man had brought the snake home, the snake raised its head, lifted its two-pronged tongue, and spoke to the old man. "The time has come for me to marry, father. Go to the king and ask him for his daughter." When the old man heard the snake's demand, he became terribly upset and threw his hands up in great despair. "Oh," he cried, "oh, how can I go to the king and make such an absurd demand? You will have my head." But the snake replied, "Listen carefully, father. Go to the king and have no fear. Make the king an offer. Tell him that you will give him whatever he may want." "But how can I do that?" asked the old man. "Do you know how poor I am? How can I offer him anything?" "I cannot explain," replied the snake, "but if you do as I ask, all will go well." The next day the old man slowly walked to the castle. With great hesitation and deep lines of worry clearly etched on his forehead, he advanced towards the throne where the king sat in great regal splendor. "Hail to thee, great king," said the old man, shaking with fear. "Peace be with you, peasants," replied the monarch. "What is it that you want?" "I have come on behalf of my son. He wants to marry your daughter." "Marry my daughter?" asked the king, greatly astounded. Then he shook his fist in anger. "You're either making a bad joke or you must be out of your mind, old man," he sputtered. "After all, you are a peasant. I am a king." "That matters not, great king," continued the old man. "If you will permit your daughter to marry my son, I will give you whatever you may want." Hearing that, the king was certain he was dealing with a feeble-minded man. "Why not amuse him?" he thought. "I shall give him a task so impossible to perform that even he will realize the stupidity of his demand." "All right, then," said the king. "I'm prepared to give my daughter to your son in marriage if you perform the following. Did you see the great forests?" And the king pointed to a vast forest that extended into the distant horizon. "By tomorrow morning you must fell all the trees and turn the area into a level field. You must plow it, break up the earth, and sow it with millet. Then you must bring me a cake made with sweet milk. That is what you must do if my daughter is to marry your son." The old man took his leave and returned home. He was sad and afraid, for he knew all too well that the king demanded impossible tasks. "Why are you crying, father?" asked the snake, when he saw the old man sitting in his chair, holding his head in his hands and sobbing with uncontrollable passion. "Why shouldn't I cry?" asked the old man. "The king has asked me to perform impossible things." And he told the snake all that had passed. "Do not fear, father, but have a good night's rest," replied the snake. "I will do exactly as the king demands." The next morning, when the peasant arose, he could not believe what he saw. The forest had disappeared. Instead, a lush field ripe with the choicest cereal swayed gently in the morning breeze blanketed the area. On the table, he found a delicious cake made of sweet milk. He hurried to the castle. "Great king," he said, "I have done as you bid." "Indeed," replied the king, most impressed with this wondrous happening. "But listen to me. There is one more thing you must do before I permit this marriage between your son and my daughter. Build a gold bridge between your house and my palace. Let gold apple trees and gold pears grow on each side of this bridge. And finally, be sure that all this is done by tomorrow morning." When the old man heard this command, he returned home and once again began to weep. But the snake was not in the least bit disturbed by the king's wishes. "Don't worry, father," he said. "Go to bed. It is easy for me to do what the king wishes." And as soon as the sun had set, the snake began work. By midnight, the task was completed. The next morning, when the peasant awoke, he was nearly blinded by the brilliant light that flooded his room. Looking out his window, he saw a span of gold leading from his house to the palace. And for the third consecutive morning, the peasant went to the castle. This time, however, the king was awaiting him at the palace gates. There he clasped the peasant in a warm embrace. "Welcome, relative," he said. "You have done as I have asked. Now go and bring your son so that we may have a wedding." Joyously, the old peasant returned to his cottage and informed the snake of what had taken place. Within an hour, the old man and his snake were in the king's chambers. This time it was a king who was horrified and who trembled with fear when he saw the form of the prospective son-in-law. Before he could say a word, before he could renege on his promise, one of the most resplendent advisers spoke up. "Great king," said the hunter, "it would be not right for you to break your promise. The old peasant has done as you have asked him to do. Hence you must also do as you have promised." Sadly, the king nodded in agreement. "Old man," he said at last, "here is a maiden. Take her to your home." Once in the cottage, the poor girl wept bitter tears, thinking of her strange and terrible fate. Then the snake turned to her and said, "Don't be afraid of me. Actually, I am not a snake at all." When she looked up, a handsome young prince dressed in magnificent silks and embroidered with the finest gold filigree stood before her. They embraced fondly, for the young girl had immediately fallen in love with him. The next day, the king sent a messenger to the cottage to inquire about his daughter. It is impossible to describe his happiness upon hearing the good news. A great wedding feast was held, and the celebration, which was attended by rich and poor alike, lasted for 3 days and 3 nights. That gets us just under halfway through the book. Oh, for gypsy folk tales, not very many gypsies involved. But I guess we should find some to read. Son. Do I see any names already following? No, but lost it. Sure. Let's see. Huh. I see another reader that's on. I don't know. Looks like they just started because it's got there yet. And if the stream would load, I'd see what she's doing. Da, 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 da. Yeah, they have been interesting stories. So that's 6 stories and got out halfway through the book. Let's see how many more stories are left. So I actually read 7 stories tonight, and there's 7 stories left. I will have to figure out what to read next. So does anyone have a raid suggestion? Riza's just starting. She's got listed as FFF, the Journey Upriver, which I have no idea what it is. The Magic Pear is reading, let's see, which one? The Witcher, The Time of Contempt. He's in chapter 2. So the only 2 readers I see on right now. Or we could raid Dusk. Oh, I haven't gotten to raid yet, so there is the follow message. There is the subscriber message. Let's see if I can type her name right. Windorf. Okay. Thank you all for coming by tonight. And we will try to go before the ads. See you next week.